Recent controversy surrounding Facebook and its users' data has prompted new questions about the social media giant. Our next guest recently spoke to the John Locke Foundation's Shaftesbury Society about Facebook, what it knows about you, with whom it shares that information, what you can do about it, and the prospect of more regulation. Bob Chandler is a technology expert. He is president of Macvantage Incorporated. Welcome to the program, Bob.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mitch.
So first of all, before we get into the regulation aspect, which will be most of this interview, Facebook's more than just a fun place to find out what your friends are up to. It really does collect a lot of information about people, doesn't it?
It does. Some of the information people willingly give to Facebook, others of it they try and figure out from what you do. And so Facebook has just a ton of information on you. First off, it knows things like your gender. It knows where you check in when you do different things. And also it starts to try and figure out, okay, what's this person's race, what's their political beliefs. And then another thing that a lot of people don't realize is if you have it on your iPhone or on your Android phone, it will actually track your location using the phone. And so if you go in and look at the information Facebook has on you, they may have all these places that you've been, and they certainly have all the places that you checked in.
Well, because Facebook has all of that information, there has been some discussion now about regulation of Facebook. And what has been discussed on that front?
There's been different things have been talked about. The EU is doing a big privacy thing right now, so that's getting a lot of press. But on the United States side, some people have talked about having even a constitutional amendment about our right to privacy. But a lot of people have talked about should there be legislation saying, what exactly can companies do with your information, and that they have to make it very explicit of what their policy is and give you ways to opt in or opt out of that policy.
Now, Facebook, like many other companies, may see the big hand of government stepping in with more regulation and say, oh no, we don't want that. But you suggest that at least in this case, Facebook might be interested in regulation. Why?
That's right. They had Mark Zuckerberg, the president of Facebook, they called him up before Congress. And so he went and testified there. That was interesting in a lot of ways. One of the interesting ways was seeing how many senators really didn't understand what Facebook was. And some of them were not sure they know what the internet is. But those are the people that would be putting this regulation together. And so one of them, Lindsey Graham, asked Mark Zuckerberg, he said, would you be open to being regulated? And Mark Zuckerberg said, well, I think so, as long as it was the right kind of regulation. And so I thought to myself, what would be the right kind of regulation for Facebook? Well, what Facebook would like to do is they would like to have regulation that would prevent other companies from coming into their space. Maybe there's some regulations that you'd have to be a really huge company in order to afford to comply with those regulations. Well, a small startup, they couldn't do that. Also, Facebook talks about trying to put some artificial intelligence in place to track hate speech. Well, that's taken them a long time to develop, and they still aren't there yet. How could some small startup company be able to do those kinds of regulations? So in essence, what Facebook would like is barriers to entry to keep them, on top.
We are chatting with Bob Chandler. He is president of Macvantage Incorporated, and I should note that he is the person who works with the computers for the John Locke Foundation, in addition to being a technology expert in general. Bob, is this something that's unusual for these larger tech companies, or have we been seeing this with the other companies as well, that once they get to be fairly large, they don't really mind as much when the government wants to step in?
I think it's something that we see kind of across all industries. Whenever somebody becomes the incumbent player, then they want to be able to keep other people out of their industry there. And so we've seen it some on the tech side, but this is one of the few times when I think people have really started to be concerned about what the tech companies are doing. In general, when they're making computers or just making phones, they haven't been that interested in it. But now that all of a sudden their private information is being sold or being put out there, that's when people have started to really think about, is this something we'd like to have regulated? And I think Facebook has thought about how could we take advantage of that.
Now, if there is no additional government regulation, are there good prospects for some competitor to come along and offer a product that might undercut Facebook's dominance? I mean, would regulation make a huge difference for Facebook in the long term?
I think part of the regulation would be closing the door after the horse is out. Do you have a MySpace account, Mitch?
No, never did.
Okay, well, MySpace, some of y'all will remember that, was a social media platform. It was one of the first ones. And so now no one's ever heard of that. And so Facebook, last year their ad revenues were up, but their visits were down. And so now a lot of people, I think, are moving to Twitter. And so Twitter is kind of taking on Facebook and some of the things that it used to do. And then the big thing now is Instagram. That's what all the kids are doing now. And so they refer to Facebook as the place where your grandparents are. And so Instagram now may be taking over. But one of the things to realize is Facebook owns Instagram.
And then there are Snapchat and other things
That's
I
right.
haven't even heard of. But it sounds as if in this regulation front, Facebook might be in the position of saying, please don't throw me in the briar patch.
That's
when
right.
all the time they would actually like something that would help preserve their business.
That's right. And also, whatever regulation the government does will be based on the current model. And so in one sense, that may actually entrench that model. So they say, oh, you have to do things this way and meet these regulations. That might prevent innovation that would allow things to be done a completely different way. Like Instagram is focused on photographs, whereas Facebook has been focused a lot, some on photographs, but a lot on just text messages coming in.
As someone who watches this industry very closely, and also as someone, as we could probably tell, is a fan of free market principles, is the best course of action here one that involves regulation, or would it be better to allow other competitors to try to take some of this market away from Facebook?
I do trust the market a lot and think that, okay, these things are fluid. Facebook seems like it's huge and could never fall, but so did MySpace. And so I think that there will be competitive pressures in there and that different companies can come in. There may be a need overall for some legislation on privacy, though, because I think privacy is now in a place where it can easily, your information can be shared instantly across the whole world. There may be some role for government, but as far as I've seen from the senators and congressmen that have talked about it so far, I'm not sure they really understand the nuances that would make that effective.
So in the brief time that we have remaining, if there is some regulation, would you warn against allowing Facebook to play a very big role in helping to write the regulation?
Yes, I would hope that they're not the ones who are writing the regulation. And but on the same token, I'm not sure I want many of those senators writing it either.
So perhaps getting some experts who don't have any skin in the game?
Yes, and I think a lot of the legislation is actually written by senators' aides and those sorts of people, and so I think there's probably a lot of those people that are really up on what's going on in the technology trends. But I think the industry needs input, but then also the public would need input as well.